Love him or hate him, Iman Gadzhi hands down is making the most solid videos on YouTube right now when it comes to cinematics and animation. And if you're anything like me, you're wondering, what the f is his animator smoking to get his videos to look like that? Well, you're in luck, because in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do the same thing. Before we even get started, you are going to need Adobe After Effects to do this kind of edit. You can probably use CapCut, Premiere, or anything else, but they're not really going to give you as much flexibility in the technical control that you're going to get with After Effects. So once you have that downloaded, you will be good to go. In order to achieve the same edits that Iman has, we need to break down these two core principles and how to execute them. First is the actual design of each scene, and second is the motion that we're actually giving it. For this video, we're going to recreate this scene. And everything you learn from this example can actually be applied to any of the other animations that he does inside of his videos. If you watch any of Iman's videos and have some familiarity with how video works, you'll notice that he always incorporates specific elements, including gradients, grids, grain, glow, Gaussian blur, and somehow they all start with G. It must be an Iman thing. Anyways, let's hop in. All right, I have my computer open here, and the first thing we're gonna do is go to After Effects, so you can see that I'm in the program right here. New composition, and then we're gonna go 3840 by 2160, and I'm just gonna name this Iman test. 3840 by 2160 is a 4K resolution. If you want to do HD, that'd be 1920 by 1080. I'm gonna hit OK, and that is gonna give us our main composition here. Now that we have this, if we go back to the reference, you're going to see that there's some stuff going on in the background, and so we want to set that up first. I went ahead and went on motion array to find the closest basically stock animation I could find, because we don't need to make that from scratch, and we are going to drag that in here. Once we have that asset dragged into our timeline, I'm actually going to create a new folder here and title this assets. I typically make these folders so that your project doesn't get super messy, or you'll have a bunch of random stuff over here on the left. So looking at this in the timeline, it's actually pretty similar to the reference, but we need to add a gradient and change the blend mode of the layer to make it a lot less distracting in the background. So to add the gradient, I'm going to select our layer. I'm going to go to help, and I just like searching things in After Effects. It makes it a lot easier. If you know your way around, that's great. But I'm going to go to help, and I'm going to search up gradient right here. And then we are going to go to layer styles and gradient overlay. Once we have gradient overlay selected, I'm going to go down here to expand the settings for gradient overlay, and we're going to hit edit gradient. In the reference, you'll see that it's more gray on the top of the frame, and then it works down to a black. So because the top of this is already black, I'm actually just going to make our job easier and flip this 90 degrees. So our job is halfway done. And then at the top, we are going to change this white to that kind of dark gray. And once that's done, I'm going to select OK. And now that we have our gradient, I'm actually going to go change the blend mode to hard light to see what that looks like. And then I'm going to adjust the gradient's position so that we get a little bit less of the bottom included. So you'll see that we're working the gradient up here. And there's actually multiple ways that you can achieve these looks in After Effects. It just depends on how you want to go. You'll see that it's looking a lot more like the video now, but now what we need to do is basically invert the color of the background and then add a second gradient that matches that background. So I'm going to go up to the help bar, and I'm going to select channel invert. And now that we see what it looks like with this mode, I'm actually going to go ahead and change the blend mode to linear burn, so that makes this a little darker. So what I'm actually going to do next is add the overlay. I also got this from Motion Array, and what Iman has on all of his videos is this kind of like film grain overlay. So all we need to do is put it in here on our After Effects timeline. You're going to see that it shows up looking like this. But you'll notice in the video that the film grain he has on is white specks instead of these black specks. So we're going to go to Effect, and then Channel, and Invert. And now these specks will be white. And then to make this gray background disappear, we're going to go to Effect. Then we're going to go to Keying, And we're going to go to difference matte. Another thing is this is looking a little too distracting with the current opacity. So we're going to take the opacity down to about 50% and see what that looks like. And then we're going to size it up to about 125 scale so that we get less of the pixels per frame. And then the last thing we need to do is add the posterized time again so that it matches the kind of drop frame look that we are going for. So you'll see this is 24 frames. We're going to bump it down to 12. All right, so those are good to go. We have the background and the foreground set up. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to start by animating the actual numbers. So we're going to write 100,000 right here. And we're going to change the fill to white. We're going to size it up. We're going to align it to the middle of the frame. Maybe make it a little bigger. And then we need to change this font. I included the font in the description of this video so that you guys can use the font as well. It's called Minecraftia from defont.com. And we're going to make sure that is nice and centered right there. Once you have your text center aligned, now we need to actually animate the text. It does this very simple like float up thing on the first frame of the scene. So you're going to go here, open the layer up, and you're going to add a keyframe to the position. And then you're going to go about, I don't know, let's say like 1 second in. And you're going to drag the position up a bit. And then to make it look more natural, I'm going to go to Keyframe Assistant and Easy Ease. And then right here, I'm going to open the graph editor and zoom in so that we can edit the velocity by hitting Command, adding this keyframe, and then dragging this so that there's a little bit more of a curve here. And that's a little too fast. So what I'm going to do is go back and hit Command and make this keyframe normal. And then I'm going to drag this out a little bit so it has a little more space. Still a little too fast. So we'll drag it out a little more. Adjust that keyframe. And then I'm actually just going to go in and delete that. And I'm going to re-add this in the graph editor right about here, drag it down, and then see what that looks like. And a lot of this is just experimentation. So there's a lot of possibilities in After Effects. You just kind of have to see what you like. The next step with this text is we actually have to make it glow a little bit. So you'll see in the reference that it looks like it's glowing. So I'm going to go to Effect, then we're going to go to Stylize and Glow, select Glow, and then we're going to adjust the parameters here to increase the glow radius so that we can see it. And then we're going to reduce the glow intensity from 1 to about maybe 0.7, and then increase the radius again so that we get a nice glow on the 100,000. So the background's done, the 100,000 is animated. Now we have to create the card, and I'm not gonna lie, this is gonna be the hard part, because what we have to do is we have to redesign the card like it is, and then we're gonna have to animate it in 3D space. So let's get into doing that. So in order to properly do this, I actually just screenshotted this from YouTube so that I can actually see what we're doing here. So I'm gonna go ahead and scale this up so that we can see it to the size of our frame. And it's always good to include the reference if you're working off something like this, just to check how your progress is going. You'll see it looks pretty similar to what Iman has. The only thing we missed here is we need to add the $ there. And his font is just slightly different than ours. It's pretty difficult to find exact fonts on things like this, but honestly, like this one better. And now we're going to redesign the card from the ground up. All right, first up for the card is making the background. So you're gonna go up to the shape layer and drag this out. And I screenshotted about like the second or third frame, so the card in the reference is a little crooked, so you can just ignore that. And then you're going to go over to the right here and find the roundness property, and then you're going to make it a bit rounded here. And then we are going to select none for stroke color, and then we're going to go to the actual fill on the rectangle right here, and we're going to make it that kind of same gray that matches the video. And then we're going to bring the opacity down to probably about 50 right here. All right, now that we have our card set up, let's double check it. It looks like we should maybe make it a bit lighter. So I'm going to revisit our colors, go back here, do this, boom, now that's done. Now we need to add the text for the card number and everything. So at this point, what you want to do is you want to basically pre-compose this. So I'm going to right click on this layer and select pre-compose. Then I'm going to title this credit card. And now you'll see that pop up over here. And what we can do with this pre-composition is it isolates the card as its own thing so that we can animate the card once we're done with it. So make sure that everything that you put on this card is going on that pre-composition. I'm going to lock all these other layers so that we don't move them. And then I'm going to write out the card number. Once you have the card number written out, we're going to shrink it down. Going to add a couple more spaces in between the letters. And then I don't know what font that they used for this, but a good safe font that I typically go with is Inter. It just looks pretty standard. So I'm going to drag Inter over here. And then it looks like there's maybe a little bit of spacing. So we're going to go over to our right and expand the letter spacing. And now we have a pretty good match for that. We also have to add the expiration date. So 0123 or 25. And then we're going to shrink this down so it matches better. What we're going to do is zoom into the composition a bit so that we can see exactly where things are lined up. And then we're going to drag them around so that they match better. We're going to bring this letter spacing in. And then we have to add the valid through lettering. And the attention is always in the details for stuff like this. The more attention to detail that you pay, the better your project is going to end up. So we're going to shrink this down, reduce the tracking, and then drag this to about right there. And then what we want to do is take all these layers you've been making, you're going to select them, copy them, open the credit card layer, and paste it, which is Command C and Command V on Mac. And now I'm going to go back here and delete those. And now they should be in our pre-composition here. Now we've got this miniature earth type thing here. So we're going to make another rectangle just like how we made the credit card. We're going to go down to fill and we're going to match the grays. And then we're going to go to the roundness and we're going to increase this by a bit. So you'll notice in the reference that there's a bit of this like earth map type thing that you can see right here. Very, very faint. So what I like to do when it comes to things like this is you have two options. You can either custom retrace it or you can go to a website like noun.com to pull pre-made vectors for things like this. So I'm going to pull in my noun.com asset and then we're going to drag it right here and we're going to increase this by a bit. Always make sure to follow the rules and all that kind of stuff with artist attribution for these elements. And then I'm going to drag the opacity down to about 60%. And I think that looks pretty good for the sake of this tutorial. Now we have to basically repeat the same thing that we just did, but for the security chip. So I'm going to zoom into 200 here, drag our board, we're going to create another shape layer. And then I'm actually going to eyedrop the fill color. So if you expand this, go to fill, eyedrop tool, you'll get kind of that gold color. And then once again, we're going to add some roundness. And the last thing is on the security chip, we have kind of these terminals here. So what we're going to want to do is actually, just because these look imperfect and kind of hand drawn, I'm just going to take the pen tool and I'm going to trace over them like so. I'm not too worried about them looking perfect because they don't look perfect. And that's kind of the style that you get with these Iman type things. They look kind of like artistic. So we're just going to drag over these really quick and trace them just for the demonstration of how to do this. And then what you're going to do right here is expand the shape elements, and you are going to increase the stroke width so that we can see it, probably to something like 2. And now you kind of have the card looking thing here. I'm not going to do the other side just for the sake of this tutorial. And then same thing for the Wi-Fi type bands. You'd basically just take your pen tool, make sure nothing's selected on the left, so it makes a new layer. Click once, drag, till it looks right, and then finish that off. Go down here, go to contents, go to fill, make the fill 0%, choose the stroke, make sure it's white, enable it with the view right there, and then increase the width. And then we're going to make sure that the end caps are rounded like so. Once again, you're going to take everything that we've done and you're going to select all of this, and then you're going to copy, go to the credit card pre-comp, select paste, and this is how you're going to check your work. It looks a little messed up here on these, so I'm just going to delete that, and then we're going to take this and adjust it, and that should be, again, good enough for a demonstration. And now you kind of have this card going on right here. All right, so now that we have the card done, the last thing we have to do is basically animate this pre-composition. So there's really 2 things that are happening in this reference. The first is the card itself is both shrinking in scale and also on a 3D plane tilting. So the first thing I'm going to do that's super easy is we're just going to keyframe the shrink down. So basically what you're going to do is take this, expand the credit card pre-composition that we've made, this is why we pre-composed it. You're going to add a keyframe for scale here, and probably about 2 seconds in right there. And we're going to shrink this down. Once we've set our keyframes for that, I'm also going to delete our reference so that we can see what's going on here. And you'll see that the card shrinks down, and we're going to have to add that same easing that we did with the numbers. So test that out, see what that looks like. I think it actually looks pretty good, just like how it is. And once you have that figured out, now we need to adjust how the card actually looks on a 3D plane. And so now it's really just a matter of keyframing the 3D the same way we've keyframed everything else. So you're going to add these right here, and then you're going to go in and keyframe the position to match what is in the video sample. So that looks good. And then now we have to hit the Y rotation. And then I'm going to speed this up a little bit, just a little bit, so it matches the numbers. Now we're really just fine tuning things. So making sure that things sync up how they're supposed to in terms of timing and in terms of where they're going on the frame. So the last thing here is kind of that I think that the card needs to move down a little bit so that everything is centered on the frame and it's not covering up this 100,000 too much. So we're going to keyframe the position as well. So up here, keyframe the position of the card to come down a little bit. And then make sure that drag the scale there so it matches. And then we're gonna add ease in on everything. And then now we're just gonna make a couple fine adjustments. As I go back and check the reference, it looks like we need to rotate this a little bit more. So we'll do that here. And there you go, guys. That is how we make Iman type animations. I'll put all the links that you need that I used in terms of assets and anything else that might be helpful for you to do this. I also have a course that teaches you how to do all of this, from scripting with AI to storyboarding to doing the animations for things like this, and teaches you how to essentially make videos that you can then go and sell to brands, companies, people, and things like that. And so the link for that will be down in the description as well. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next one.